This is becoming my favorite part of the show. I love this part because I'm going to interview and bring up a very amazing guy, very great author. He wrote this book here. This book here is called All the Beauty in the World. You can get it, just came out this past month. So a little bit about him. This is Patrick Bringley. He actually, yeah, give it up for Patrick Bringley. So Patrick is a tour guide, actually. No big deal. We are pretty cool. Okay, you're not impressed. But he is a tour guide now, but he actually used to work at the New Yorker. He worked at the New Yorker for a while. He'll talk about all this, but he actually underwent a family tragedy that just made him kind of rethink his life, and he became a security guard at the Met Museum for 10 years. Because he wanted to be surrounded by beauty. That's where the title comes from, All the Beauty in the World. He wanted to kind of find all the meaning and everything he could from this place, and he wrote this book about it. I don't want to ramble on too long. It's an incredible book. You can buy it after the show. We'll talk about all that in a second, but for now, please welcome to the stage Patrick Bringley, everybody. Come on. Get your mic. All right. Very professional. I got my little cards here. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How's everybody doing?
Oh, we're good. We're good. All right. So this is Patrick, everybody. He's the author of this book, this amazing book. To start, I guess, to start this interview off, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. This is a good show. Funny.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks.
Informative.
Cool. Cool. All right, and that's the interview. Thanks, guys, for coming out. Thank you so much to Patrick. All right, great. Well, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. So what, I guess, I said a little bit up top about the book and why you did it, but I guess, why did you write this book from your experience?
Sure.
Yeah.
I worked as a guard at the Met for 10 years, and I'm sure this is the New York show, right? You've all been to the Met, and it's this world in miniature in the sense that it brings all these cultures and puts them under one roof, but it's also a living world. There's 500 guards who work there, a couple of whom are with us tonight.
All right.
The gentleman who knew about the Earth Room, he's a former guard.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, exactly. So, I explored that world of all the arts and all the people and the 7 million people who come in every year. And it occurred to me that not many people write books about art that are about the subjective experience of looking at art and of wandering through a museum and of being quiet in a museum and exploring the place. You pick up an art book and it tends to be, some academic, scholarly thing. So I thought, well, maybe the guard's voice could be a story that should be told.
Real quick, has anyone here, round of applause if you've never been to the Met? No
one?
No one wants to admit it.
Yeah.
Because we would kick your ass out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think this is I guess a question you probably get from having spent a lot of time at the Met. What is your favorite piece of art?
Ooh, it's tough.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, I don't have a mind, I think, that can just rank them like, shortstops for the Mets or something. Oftentimes when you're...
Notice that he said Mets, you Yankees freaks.
Go
There
Mets.
you go.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Exactly. Yeah. Oftentimes when you're in front of a work of art, it sort of feels unsurpassable. And then you wander away and you have a memory of it, but it sort of decays and you need to come back and discover what it is. But we talked about,
yes.
one of my favorites is Peter Bruegel's The Harvesters. That's
this one here, guys. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That would be me right there. That's
yeah.
Pretty cool. So what do you like about this painting?
Sure. So, as a guard, you get on post a half an hour before the museum opens. And, there's just nobody there. It's quiet. And these paintings can feel like windows just into other worlds. And there are some windows that kind of seem to blow holes through the walls of the museum. And this is very much like this. It's a big canvas, 1565, by this Dutch master, or the Flemish master. And it is one of these paintings, too, that is kind of, I think of as a long looker. If you look at this thing kind of passively, day after day, standing in the corners, sort of wandering by it, its colors bloom. It sort of blossoms in a way. The sunlight kind of shines on it if you look at it sort of passively. But it's just such a beautiful picture because it's about so much. It's the first landscape, kind of true landscape painting in the history of Western art. And what I mean by that is that, typically a landscape in earlier pictures was used as a background for some religious scene that was happening in the foreground. But in the Renaissance, I mean, Peter Bruegel is like, well, let's paint a picture that the background is the foreground. It's just a picture of the world that Bruegel would have seen around him. And you get this, sweep back to the distant horizon where you see the ships sailing, ready to bring the grain off to port. And you follow the path down here, and you see monks bathing a swimming hole nude. You see boys playing sort of a blood sport where they throw sticks at roosters to kill them. You follow along here. You got the men mowing the grain. There's this little detail in the corner here where you see a bottle of water that they've stored inside the grain so it wouldn't get too hot. And then finally at the bottom, you get these 9 peasants. And they are breaking from the day's labor, sitting under a pear tree there. And, like you said, how much more restful could you get than that guy right there? They're sort of comical as sort of normal people would have been portrayed at that time, but they're also sympathetic. It's so human. So it just kind of seems like a picture of all of it,
That's quite a description.
I had a lot of time to come up with it.
And have it be known that that's a description without any use of drugs. That's pretty impressive.
That's
Nice
true.
work.
That's true.
Very impressive. Okay, so first of all, the book is great. I'm sorry I didn't lead off with that. I hope it didn't hurt your feelings. But I really loved it. It was really great. And there was a part of it I thought was really interesting and something that spoke to me, where you said you were in the American wing. When you would stand in the American wing, you said that the objects created one side of the American experience, and the guards created another. And I thought that was really interesting. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
I mean, the guards are a more fuller expression of the American experience, for sure. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're standing in the American wing, and a lot of it is just, 18th century paintings of people with wigs on, who the people come up to you and say, is that George Washington? They assume that any man with a wig is George Washington. But then standing right beside that are guards. I mean, 40% of New York City is foreign-born. I'd say 50, 60% of the guards are foreign-born, from every country you can imagine. But there are also kind of concentrations. Tons of guards from Albania, tons of guards from Guyana. The longest-serving guard, he's been at the Met, I think, 40-some years. And he is Mr. Sohan. His son, Dr. Sohan, delivered both of our children.
That's cool.
But anyway, so you get that you get all sorts of stories inside there. And if you talk to the guards, you're going to learn things about America that are certainly not in the paintings.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I think that was a really interesting part of the book for me. I thought it was really cool, the story of the guards who actually worked there. Because so many of us, you go to museums and everyone's so hyper-focused on the work and all that stuff that you forget that there are people who come in, day out, and they clock in. They go through pairs of shoes, all these different things that you don't think about. Also, there was another thing that spoke to me that I thought was really great, and I'd want to hear your take on it. You made a statement in the book that you said all meaning is always created locally. And you were talking about the art and the paintings and things like that. And I think that was a really interesting phrase, especially today when everyone is on, Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn and MySpaces. I don't know what you kids are doing these days. But can you talk more about that phrase?
Yeah, sure. So that was in a chapter toward the end of my 10 years there. Right back to back, there was a Michelangelo drawing show. And then there was a show, Gee's Bend, these women in rural Alabama that were doing these quilts. And when I was in the Michelangelo show, the drawing, you think of him as this big sort of colossus of art history, right? But when you start reading the guy's letters, he was just put upon all the time, just bitching about his time period, bitching about the Pope and how he's not able to do as much as he can, and everything he does is a failure. And this is the High Renaissance that he's talking about, or we think of it as the High Renaissance.
Like all artists today, all they do is bitch about the Pope.
Of course.
Something's never changed,
Bitch.
Yeah.
And you realize that, that guy had to just get up in the morning and start sketching away, and then that's what he did for his 70-plus years career. And there's not some sort of plane of art history, like he exists inside a textbook or something. He exists in his little local context, and he's doing the work. And it just occurred to me, when you work the Gee's Bend show and these women in rural Alabama that don't even think of themselves as artists sort of in the same way, because that they were making these quilts in order to keep their children warm. But there's something in human beings that even when we're making quilts to make our children warm, if there's a tradition of making them beautiful, they get more and more and more beautiful, and just extraordinary original things come from it. But I was equating the two. I mean, yes, the meaning that we create is local. It happens in little rooms like this or whatever. It's not sort of, I don't know, done at some sort of remove.
Right. Yeah. I thought that was great. I think it's very true and a very good point. Oh, yeah. Give him a round of applause. He earned it on that one.
Trying.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about, there was one point, I guess also another thing that I thought was interesting when you said one objective when viewing art is how we create. How are we going to create? And I think, to me, I've always thought, and this is why it spoke to me, I've always thought that humans are innately creative. And that doesn't mean that everyone has to take up a paintbrush, but I think at the very least, all humans want to create their own life. They want to create something and leave something, whether it's their family or whatever. We want to create and have control to create. And you talked about that, and you talked about how one of the reasons you left your job there was because you were starting to have a family as well, but also one of the reasons you came to the job was because you also wanted to take control as well. Could you talk a little bit about what brought you to the job and also why you left?
Sure, yeah, so there's all different ways to use art. And when I came to the job, my brother had been ill a long time and he died. And I didn't relish the idea of just sort of rushing back to some office job and just kind of, pushing some ball forward and advancing some trivial project and try to climb some ladder or whatever the case may be. And I felt kind of speechless, and I kind of wanted to stand still a while and sort of remain speechless in this numinous place with this art from all over the world. And that's one way you can use art. It's silent, it's still, it can quiet you, and you can find consolation in that. You can also sort of lose yourself. You can kind of become invisible. And as a guard, you're sometimes almost literally invisible. You're kind of melted into the wall. But any patron can do that too. You wander from Egypt to Greece to Rome, and you feel just like a tiny little thing.
I've done stand-up shows where I feel invisible. Don't worry. I know exactly what you mean.
Sure.
Yeah, believe me.
Sure. But there are other ways to use art too, and one way to use art is, when I was on the job and I had been there years and my wife and I had kids, and that is so hard, ridiculously hard raising your kids, and it is building something. And I was looking at these pictures and you're like, they're so beautiful and still and quiet and consoling on the outside. But of course, behind that is an effort. It's someone chewing up a paintbrush with frustration, the frustration of creating something. And it does require getting one's hands dirty. It requires failure, a lot of failure. And
pain. I remember you mentioning, you were talking about the pains that Michelangelo must have felt lying on his back for so long. And you don't think of that. The artists' frustrations, and their neck hurting, their hands hurting, their relationship troubles, all the things that they go through while they're doing these things,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one way to look at the Met is all these sparkingly beautiful things. And then another way to look at the Met is you're like, man, these were all made by human hands, everything in here. And I've got a pair of hands, and I've got, a head and a heart that's similar to the ancient Greeks, what they had. And, I can also try to make something, like you said, and it might not be a work of art, it might be a book, it might be a meal, or whatever the case may be.
Okay. All right, we'll keep on moving with the little cards here. Very professional, very professional. So another one I liked, I wanted to show this one, was the Temple of Dendur that you talked about. I thought it was interesting. This is very cool if you guys, those of you guys who haven't been to the Met, I know you're out there, But this is actually very beautiful, and I thought what was interesting about it was you talked about also along with your lines of how the times change in the context. I thought it was a very interesting metaphor for New York, how you talked about how when this was made, it was a temple, it was a sacred place where you had to be like a clergy in a certain class of a human just to be able to walk around it, And today, there are kids stomping around covered in chocolate or whatever the hell. It just, the times change, and around it things change, but the beauty stays the same. And I thought that was really interesting. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. One of the common questions you get as a guard is this real? Is this real? And you get that about the temple all the time.
Yeah.
And it's people that literally don't know. It's their first time in a big museum before. But it's also people, I think, just grappling, like, can it be true?
Right.
Can it be true that was an ancient temple on the banks of the Nile, and it got picked up, and now I can wander on into it covered in chocolate, like you said.
Right.
And
Maybe it's just me, I guess. I don't know.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then they would wander. I would say, yeah, man, that's true, and that's real. And they'd wander away, and as a guard, you get to stand back for over 8 and 12-hour days and really reflect on Egyptian history and how long that was. And the crazy thing that I point out on the wall over there, I'll say, you see that fellow? That's the pharaoh. We can't see him there. The guy with a kind of bowling pin on his head, and that's the pharaoh. And I'll say, they've got his name written on the cartouche there, and he's got a funny name, Caesar Augustus. So this was created at the very, very end of Egyptian history, in this brief moment when there was hope that the Romans who would come in would keep the party going and would rule as pharaohs and worship the Egyptian gods. It didn't happen. But you know what that means? That means that this is from about the year 0, so it's about 2,000 years separated from us, and this is 3,000 years separated from the pyramids at Giza. We are closer to this by 1,000 years than this is close to the Old Kingdom pharaohs,
Crazy.
which just makes us reflect on, the United States. Our version of time is not a rounding
Nuts.
error.
Yeah, the year 0. That's insane. That's the year I graduated high school. Okay. All right. Well, anyways, guys, this is a time of the interview where we're gonna get to the nitty gritty. We're gonna do the rapid fire questions. Yeah.
All
look
right.
at that. Your face is on fire. All right.
My God.
I'm very good at these graphics, guys. You can teach yourself anything on YouTube. Isn't that amazing? All right. So now I just want to ask you questions as a dude. We're just two dudes hanging out, just man spreading up here. It's great. So I just want to ask you some questions. New York questions about your job, but let's just go through them. Get to know you. Who is your quintessential, dead or alive, New Yorker?
Vincent Kitsamepi, sitting right there.
What was his name? Sorry?
Vincent.
Vincent?
Because, this is a man who's a guard at the Met, and he came to this country. What year you come? 1995.
Wow.
But he's a New Yorker, like you were saying, right? And yes, his favorite gallery in the whole of the Met is the Astor Court. Some of you might know the Chinese Scholars Garden. Mm-hmm. And he is building himself a house in Ghana where he's going to retire half the time. And in his house in Ghana, he is building his Chinese Scholars Garden with the moon gate from the Met.
That's cool.
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. That goes back to what I was saying before. I think one of the great things about New York, and it would cease to be New York if it didn't allow people from all over the place to come in.
Yeah, exactly.
It reminds me of a great quote by E.B. White. If you've never read the book, Here's New York, you're doing yourself a disservice. It's like a love letter to New York, and he says, natives give New York its solidity and its continuity. Commuters give it its tidal restlessness, but settlers give it passion. And that's what I think makes New York special. You wouldn't have the Brooklyn Bridge, you wouldn't have the Statue of Liberty, you wouldn't have half anything here. Because it takes a different type of appreciation, too, to mix in with the people who are from here and whatever, to create different things. So lay off me for not being from here, all right?
I'm not either.
Yeah, anyways, we're going to keep on moving. Rapid fire. Your face is still on fire. All right. What is your favorite piece of art about New York City? It can be a movie, a song, a bathroom stall drawing. I don't care.
Sure. I'm a big Dylan guy, big Bob Dylan fan.
All right.
And the song Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues, when he goes, I'm going back to New York City. I do believe I've had enough. Enough of everything else. New York City.
That's true. I love it. I love it. It gets in your veins, baby. It gets in your veins. That reminds me of the John Steinbeck quote where he says, how terrible New York, its climate is a scandal, its politics are used to frighten little children. He says, but once you've made New York your home, no place else is good enough. And I think that's true. Once it's become your part of you, it's over. There's nothing else that can.
I married a Brooklyn girl. We're raising Brooklyn kids. It's
all
over.
right, nice. Inwood.
Oh yeah, Bay Ridge originally.
All right. What is the last book you read?
Last book I read. I'm reading this book about the Frick, the Magnolia Palace by Fiona Davis. That's what I'm reading right now.
It's about the Frick.
It's about the Frick, because that's another museum.
It's a Frick museum. Has anyone here not been to the Frick?
Sure, some people.
Get out of here. No,
Yeah.
That's great. No, so the Frick Museum is his old mansion on Fifth Avenue up next to Central Park. It used to be Henry Clay Frick was a steel magnate, whatever, and it's a very beautiful museum actually. You should go check it out. So that's the book you're reading. You like it?
Yeah, I do.
Nice.
I do.
Well, these are rapid fire questions. Can't dig into that too much.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
keep on moving. All right. So, what is the craziest thing you've ever seen in New York?
Oh my God. Well, I'll give you one from the Met. At the Met, I was working in the Picasso at the Met show, and it's this huge blockbuster, and we're cooking in 1,400 people an hour. And most of the paintings at the Met, they're hung from copper wires that are sort of near the ceiling. And a guy takes the inside track sort of around the people, and he just throws his shoulder into Picasso's Woman in White. So I did see a Picasso swinging like this. I mean, it might be exaggerating my memory, but it was like full on Pit and the Pendulum stuff.
Yikes.
But then it came to a rest, and you called the chief, and the chief had the technicians look at it, and it was all right. It was all right.
Wow, that's nice. That's crazy. That's crazy. Tamer than I thought it would be. Yeah, I'll say that. But still crazy.
Yes, this is very clean.
I guess mine is very different. I remember I was on the L train heading out to Brooklyn. It was like 12:30 at night. This is years ago, and the train goes slower at night, and all the people are going on to go out to the bars and stuff. And this guy threw up as soon as the train left the station, and it was going super slow, and the barf was going down the entire car. The train was packed, and you had New Yorkers from all walks of life all laughing and dodging this guy's barf. The entire way there. It was like 10 minutes. Yeah.
I've had that.
Very different than the Picasso. All right. What city in the world would you want to visit that you haven't been to?
That I haven't been to. I'm going to say Beijing. I'd love to go to China. Never been there. Haven't been to that part of the world. I'd like to see more museums.
More museums in China.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All
But
right.
I'd like to be, I don't know, anywhere. I haven't traveled all that much.
Really? Haven't traveled much, huh?
Yeah, a little bit. She speaks Italian. We got to go to more places in Italy. Yeah.
You're like, she speaks Italian. I just have her talk to me in Italian. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, I'm in Italy right now. This is cool.
Yeah.
What are you doing? I'm traveling to Italy right now. Come on, honey. Keep it going.
Sure.
All right. What's the best concert you've seen in New York?
Best concert I've seen in New York. When I just showed up to New York, I saw a Sonic Youth concert that blew my mind because I was 18 years old, and it was just the perfect thing in downtown New York. And you're like, man, I'm here.
Wow.
It was 2001, which isn't so not their heights, I suppose, but it was it was
Sonic
transporting.
Youth. I don't know if half the room was alive when they were popular. But yeah, they were a thing. They were definitely a thing. That's cool.
Oh, they're amazing.
They were big.
Yeah.
They were big. I guess I'll tell you, my favorite concert I've ever been to was Bruce Springsteen. I saw him at Giant Stadium before they tore it down.
It's not in New York.
No, it's not. All right. Hey, hold on a second. Is there some conspiracy over here? What are you guys all doing here? Unbelievable. Why are you guys all... The New York Giants play there. Give me a break. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. All right. So you're a tour guide? You're a tour
Yeah,
guide,
well, I've
fellow
been doing
tour guide?
tours at the Met. I've been
That's
doing
right.
tours at the Met.
So as a tour guide, I understand you do the Met, but what would be your favorite place to tour, to show people around in New York?
I love Lower Manhattan. I love by the Battery. I love around the Seaport. I love it's so old, it's so beautiful, the water. I love the ferries. I love the history of the harbor. I love the Melville stuff and the Whitman stuff, and yeah, definitely around there.
In Lower Manhattan, so all of
Yeah.
it, financial district, everything?
Yeah, I don't know. I find it very romantic around there and very just kind of old New York. I love the
Yeah.
water. You forget about the water in some neighborhoods in New York, but not there.
Yeah, that's true. You can walk in any direction, just hit, let me get pretty much any direction, just hit water pretty soon. That's pretty
Yeah.
nice. That's cool. That Lower Manhattan's good. A lot of history down there, obviously. You know, don't have time to get into that. You know, we gotta keep it moving. But all right, cool. I also was wondering. I have another couple of things real quick. I thought there were not to go back to the book, but yeah, that's where Come on, he wrote a book. That's pretty cool.
It's on for sale over there.
It is for
PNT
sale.
Knitwear.
Yes.
They've been very kind.
Yeah, PNT Knitwear will definitely get you guys over there once the
Yeah.
show's over. Real quick, there was a couple of things that I thought were really kind of cool, and I wanted to bring them up and ask you about. There was one quote that I really liked, and I guess it relates to your experience with taking this job and everything. You said, "When we adore, we apprehend beauty. When we lament, we see wisdom of the adage of life that all life is suffering." What did you mean by that?
Sure. So at the Met, actually, I think of them as the Jesus pictures, and that's in honor of a man who was walking through the old master paintings, and he was probably looking for, water lilies or sunflowers or Van Gogh, and he said, "God damn it, I'm in the Jesus pictures again." But I rather, although I'm not a Christian, I adore those pictures because you have all these 14th century paintings of the Passion, which is just an old word that means suffering. And if you know anything about the 14th century, that was a hard luck century. I mean, maybe a third of Europe died in the bubonic plague. And it makes good sense that they would be thinking about suffering and they'd be thinking about loss. And there's all of these heartbreaking pictures of that are lamentations of, Christ in his mother's arms, of, John the beloved evangelist, crumpled over him. And what's interesting, I mentioned the adoration because you also have these adorations around, of the infant Christ, but they're painted in the same kind of atmosphere. And I think that any of us who have spent time with at somebody's bedside who is suffering, you know that your heart kind of brims at the same time as your heart breaks. It's very painful, but it's also very, very beautiful. And there's something very plain and mysterious and kind of stripped down to its basics that sort of reveals just the poignancy of the human drama. And it seems to me that the old masters in the Met are so often painting like that exact feeling, that poignancy, that adoration and lamentation as two sides of one coin.
Yeah.
So I find that just infinitely moving.
Yeah, and you talked about that in another part of the book where you said that all art derives from the desire to freeze a moment in time, to keep something and make it permanent, even though everything is so transient. But then you also talk about how by attempting to do that, by actually putting something out there and thinking about it and doing it, you actually are able to make it timeless. Just like the art, that thing's been there for 2,000 years and there's still people appreciating the workmanship, but also the feeling behind it. And I think that's also something that's great, that's lost with, let's say, even TV and TikTok and all this stuff is when someone writes a book, when someone paints a painting, they live with that painting. They live with that book for months, years of their life. And they're putting that all into that. It's not fleeting. It's thought out. It's actually suffered and sweat over and all that. And I think that was, I guess, a very interesting part of the book as well. Yeah, someone's like, yeah, cool. But one last question, and then this is the last rapid fire question. Very, very important one. Will you be my friend?
Oh yeah, I would love to be your friend, Tom Delgado.
So. You see that? My childhood bully, I have friends. So guys, we made it to the end, guys. I can't recommend this book enough. You can get it here after the show. It's really, really great.
I'll sign it too.
And he'll sign it. He's going to be here. You can get the artist himself to sign it. It's really, really great. And also, too, it's inspiring, because he was a guard there for 10 years, and he wrote it kind of like, I got to commemorate this time. I have to do it. And it kind of shows you what we all kind of have inside us at any given moment. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming,
Thank
Patrick.
you.
Really,
thank you all.
Good for Patrick,
thank you,
everybody.
thank you, thank
Patrick
you.
Bringley.